The winter wind howled outside Westbridge Community Shelter as Sienna Reynolds clutched her 3-month-old daughter Olivia tighter against her chest. Her fingers, red and chapped from the cold, trembled as she faced the 2 social workers standing before her. "Please don't take my child," she whispered, tears streaming down her hollow cheeks. "She's all I have left." The older social worker, Mrs. Patterson, sighed. "Ms. Reynolds, you've been living in your car for 6 weeks. The temperature's dropping. Below freezing, it's simply not safe for an infant." "I'm trying," Sienna pleaded. "I have 3 job interviews lined up next week. The car keeps us warm enough, and I always make sure Olivia eats first." The truth was more desperate than she'd admit. After her husband David's death in a construction accident, the medical bills had devoured their savings. Then came the eviction, followed by her layoff from the dental office, where she'd worked as a receptionist. Planning a nursery to sleeping in the back seat of her aging Honda. "The state has resources to care for your daughter while you stabilize your situation," the younger social worker said, reaching for Olivia. "No." Sienna stepped back, her voice breaking. "I won't let her think I abandoned her like my mother did. To me, we stay together." Adrian Cole stood frozen in the doorway, a box of donated coats in his arms. At 38, the real estate developer had only intended to drop off the winter clothing his company had collected before heading home to his son. But something about the young woman's desperation cut through his carefully maintained detachment. Her copper-colored hair hung in a messy ponytail, her clothes were worn but clean. And despite everything, she stood tall, her green eyes fierce with maternal protection. She reminded him of someone his late wife Jennifer in those final months when she'd fought so hard to stay with their son. "There must be alternatives," Adrian found himself saying, setting down the box and stepping forward. The social workers turned, immediately recognizing the billionaire whose name graced the children's hospital wing across town. "Mr. Cole," Mrs. Patterson straightened. "We're simply following protocol for the child's safety." Adrian ran a hand through his dark hair, knowing he should walk away. His life was complicated enough raising 7-year-old Thomas alone while running Cole Developments. Yet something about this woman's determination struck him. "I have a proposition," he said, surprising himself. "Ms. Reynolds and her daughter can stay in my guest house temporarily. It's fully furnished, heated, and would give her stability while she finds employment." Sienna stared at him, suspicion replacing desperation. "Don't accept charity from strangers." "It's not charity," Adrian replied coolly. "It's practical. The guest house sits empty, and my housekeeper could use occasional help with my son after school. You'd work for your keep until you find something permanent." Mrs. Patterson looked skeptical. "Mr. Cole, while generous. This arrangement would keep mother and child together in a safe environment," Adrian finished firmly. "Isn't that the goal?" Sienna studied the tall, imposing man in the expensive overcoat. His steel-gray eyes revealed little emotion. But there was no pity in them, only a straightforward offer that would keep Olivia in her arms. 3 months, she said finally. "I'll accept for 3 months only, and I'll work for every penny."
Adrian
nodded once. "My driver will take us to collect your belongings." As they left the shelter, the snow beginning to fall in gentle flakes, neither realized how this temporary solution would permanently alter the foundations of their carefully guarded hearts. "This is the guest house?" Sienna whispered, stepping into the warm space that was larger than the apartment she'd shared with David. Tasteful furnishings in muted blues and grays filled the open concept living area. While a small kitchen gleamed with stainless steel appliances, Adrian set her single suitcase down, watching her reaction with guarded interest. "I hope it's suitable. There's a nursery through that door. Thomas used it when he was younger, and we had overnight guests." Sienna's throat tightened at the sight of the pristine white crib. "It's more than suitable. It's overwhelming. Mrs. Fitzgerald, my housekeeper, stocked the refrigerator. She'll explain your duties tomorrow." Adrian moved toward the door, clearly uncomfortable with emotional displays. "The main house is just across the garden." "Good night, Ms. Reynolds." "Sienna," she corrected softly. "And thank you, Mr. Cole." "Adrian," he replied, and was gone. Sienna placed Olivia in the crib, watching her daughter's peaceful sleep before collapsing onto the sofa, too stunned to cry. How had her life led her to the charity of a billionaire stranger with eyes that seemed to carry their own grief? The following days established a routine. Each morning, Sienna helped Mrs. Fitzgerald with breakfast and household tasks before heading out for job interviews. In the afternoons, she watched Thomas after school as serious. Quiet boy with his father's gray eyes and a maturity no 7-year-old should possess. My mom died when I was 5, Thomas informed her on the third day, as they colored at the kitchen table. Dad says she's in heaven, but sometimes I forget what she looked like. Sienna's heart cracked. That must be very hard. Would you like to see pictures of her? Thomas nodded, and they spent the afternoon going through photo albums, Mrs. Fitzgerald. Retrieved from storage, Adrian returned to find them laughing over a photo of Thomas as a toddler, covered in spaghetti sauce. Dad, Thomas jumped up. Sienna helped me remember Mom's smile, and she doesn't mind when I ask questions about her. Adrian's expression softened in a way Sienna hadn't seen before. That's wonderful, buddy. Later, after Thomas went to bed, Adrian found Sienna in the kitchen washing dishes. You didn't have to do that with Thomas today, he said quietly. I know it's not part of your duties. Sienna dried a plate carefully. He's a remarkable boy. He's talking about his mother. Isn't a duty, it's a privilege. Jennifer died of breast cancer 2 years ago, Adrian offered unexpectedly. I've tried to keep her memory alive for him, but ... double quotes, but it hurts, Sienna finished. I understand. My husband David died just before Olivia was born. Adrian studied her, really seeing her for the first time, not as a charity case, but as a woman carrying her own grief with quiet dignity. How are the job interviews going? He asked, changing the subject. Sienna's shoulders slumped slightly. 6 rejections so far. My resume gap after Olivia's birth concerns them, and without reliable transportation. Use one of my cars, Adrian said impulsively. There are 3 in the garage besides my daily driver. I couldn't possibly, it's practical, not charity, he interrupted, using the same words from their first meeting. You can't secure employment without reliable transportation. Their eyes met, and something shifted between them, a mutual recognition of pride, battling necessity. It's very practical. Sienna agreed with the ghost of a smile. Thank you. As weeks passed, the rigid boundaries between employer and employee blurred. Adrian found himself lingering over breakfast to hear Sienna's thoughts on books they'd both read. Sienna discovered the garden was his sanctuary, where he spent Sunday afternoons tending rare roses in memory of Jennifer. One evening, arriving home early, Adrian paused in the doorway. Watching Sienna dance around the kitchen with Thomas and Olivia, all 3 laughing as music played. The house hadn't contained such joyful sounds since before Jennifer's diagnosis. For the first time in years, Adrian felt the ice around his heart beginning to thaw. It terrified him. You've transformed this place, Adrian commented, watching. Sienna arranged fresh flowers in the entryway vase. February had melted into March, and with it, the stark emptiness of his home had softened into something warmer. Sienna smiled, tucking a strand of copper hair behind her ear. Mrs. Fitzgerald taught me how Jennifer liked things arranged. I hope that's okay. It's more than okay, Adrian admitted. Thomas is happier than I've seen him in years. He got an A on his science project because you stayed up helping him. Build that solar system, Sienna reminded him. You're a good father, Adrian. Their conversation was interrupted by Mrs. Fitzgerald bustling in with the mail. Miss Reynolds, there's a letter for you. Looks important. Sienna opened the envelope, her face lighting up. Got the job. The dental practice in Westbrook is offering me the office manager position. Adrian felt conflicted, proud of her achievement, yet strangely disappointed at what it meant. That's wonderful. When do you start? Next Monday? The salary is enough? For me to start looking for an apartment nearby? The words hung between them, a reminder that their arrangement had always been temporary. Before Adrian could respond, his phone rang his executive assistant with an urgent matter regarding their Chicago development. We'll celebrate tonight, he said, already distracted by business. Thomas will be thrilled for you. Later that afternoon, Sienna walked through downtown with Olivia bundled in her stroller, happiness bubbling through her. Financial independence was within reach again. She turned the corner and froze. Well, look who it is, drawled a familiar voice. Is playing mommy in the fancy part of town? Neil, she whispered, instinctively pulling Olivia's stroller closer. Her ex-boyfriend's presence was like a splash of cold water, dragging her back to mistakes she'd made before meeting David. Heard you landed on your feet after David kicked it, Neil continued, eyeing her coat. Nice threads. You always did know how to upgrade. What do you want? Sienna asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Neil stepped closer. Just checking. Remembered you owe me money. It's $2,000, if memory serves. I don't owe you anything, Sienna countered. That was your gambling debt, not mine. Neil's smile vanished. Your signature's on the loan papers, sweetheart. Been looking for you since you disappeared. Now that you're back on your feet, ... Is everything all right? Came a deep voice behind her. Adrian stood there, his expression glacial as he assessed the situation. He'd been heading to a meeting when he spotted Sienna across the street. Perfect timing, Neil smirked. Your new sugar daddy? Adrian stepped forward. I suggest you walk away. Something in Adrian's tone must have registered because Neil backed up, though his parting words sent ice through Sienna's veins. This isn't over. Debts always come due, Sienna. The drive home was silent until Adrian finally spoke. Who was that man? Someone from my past, Sienna answered, shame coloring her words. Before David, I made ... mistakes, bad relationships, worse decisions. The debt he mentioned, Neil gambled out. The window Neil gambled. When we were together, he forged my signature on loan documents. I didn't know until collectors started calling after we broke up. Why didn't you tell me this before? Because it's humiliating, Sienna burst out. Would you have offered me the guest house if you'd known I had debt collectors looking for me? That before David straightened me out, I was just another gullible girl making terrible choices? Adrian's hands tightened on the steering wheel. I would have wanted the truth. The truth, Sienna whispered, is that I've been running from more than homelessness. I've been running from who I was before David showed me I deserved better. When they arrived home, Thomas ran out excitedly with a drawing he'd made. Stopping short when he sensed the tension between them, Adrian forced a smile for his son's benefit. But Sienna recognized the walls rebuilding in his eyes. Walls she'd somehow breached without realizing it, now reinforced against her deceptions. That night, after both children were asleep, Sienna sat in the guest house, researching apartments she could afford on her new salary, trying to ignore the ache in her chest. She'd grown too comfortable here, too attached to a family that wasn't hers. Meanwhile, Adrian poured himself a rare scotch, contemplating how quickly Sienna Reynolds had become essential to their lives and how dangerous that might be for all. Of them, April brought rain showers and blooming daffodils to the Cole estate. But the warmth that had grown between Adrian and Sienna had chilled considerably. For 2 weeks, their interactions had been strictly practical discussions about Thomas's schedule or Olivia's needs. Nothing more. Sienna's job at Westbrook Dental was going well, though the commute ate into her time with Olivia, she'd found an affordable apartment across town and had scheduled a meeting with Adrian to discuss her departure date. Dad, why is Sienna sad all the time now? Thomas asked one morning, poking at his cereal. Adrian looked up from his coffee, guilt gnawing. At him? Is she? I hadn't noticed. You're not looking then, Thomas replied with child's honesty, and you're sad too. Did you have a fight? Before Adrian could answer, Mrs. Fitzgerald entered. Mr. Cole, there's a man at the gate, insisting on speaking. With Ms. Reynolds. Security stopped him, but he's quite persistent. Adrian's jaw tightened. Neil? He didn't give a name, sir? I'll handle it. Adrian rose, instructing Mrs. Fitzgerald to keep Thomas inside. At the gate, Neil stood arguing with the security guard. He straightened when he saw Adrian approaching. Where's Sienna? Neil demanded. We have unfinished business. And any business with Ms. Reynolds goes through me, Adrian replied coldly. State your purpose. Neil pulled out folded papers, loan documents. $2,000 plus interest. Sienna signed. Now she's responsible. Adrian examined the papers, immediately spotting the obvious forgery of Sienna's signature. These are fraudulent, Neil sneered. Prove it. Meanwhile, I'll take what I'm owed, or I start making noise about her past. Did she tell you everything? About the parties? The men before me? Does your son know what kind of woman is watching him? Something in Adrian snapped. Stepping closer, he lowered his voice. Listen carefully. I photographed these forged documents. Touch Sienna or contact her again, and I'll have my legal team pursue fraud charges that will bury you. Now leave. After Neil departed, Adrian studied the papers more carefully, troubling questions forming. What hadn't Sienna told him? He prided himself on thorough background checks, yet clearly, he'd missed significant details about the woman living on his property, caring for his son. That evening, when Sienna returned from work, Adrian was waiting in his study. We need to talk, he said, gesturing to the chair opposite his desk. Maintaining the formal distance that had grown between them, Sienna sat nervously. I was going to speak with you too. I found an apartment. Neil came by today, Adrian interrupted, watching her face pale. He brought loan documents. Adrian, I can explain. I recognize the forgery immediately, he continued. But it raises questions about what else you haven't disclosed. He slid a folder across the desk. My security team conducted a more thorough background check. Sienna's hands trembled as she opened it, seeing pages detailing her past: the arrests for trespassing at a college party when she was 19, the restraining order she'd filed against Neil, the bankruptcy she and David had filed after his medical bills mounted. You investigated me? She whispered, hurt burning through her shock. I should have done it more thoroughly before allowing you near my son, Adrian replied, his tone businesslike, though his eyes betrayed conflict. Your history shows a pattern of poor decisions before you met your husband, so that's it? You've judged me based on mistakes I made a decade ago? Sienna stood, anger replacing hurt. Yes, I was young and foolish once. I trusted the wrong people. I followed the wrong crowd. Then I grew up, Adrian, just like you did. This isn't about me, isn't it? Sienna challenged. You've built this perfect fortress to protect Thomas and yourself. Anyone who might have flaws or make mistakes gets kept outside. But guess what? Everyone has a past. Everyone has made choices they regret. Adrian stood, his composure slipping. My son has already lost his mother. I won't expose him to. To what? To someone human? Someone who fell and got back up again? Tears filled Sienna's eyes. That's the most important lesson I could ever teach Olivia, that our mistakes don't define us. I trusted you, Adrian said quietly. No, Sienna shook her head sadly. You never truly did. If you had, you would have asked me about my past instead of investigating me like a criminal. She placed the folder back on his desk. I'll be out of the guest house by Sunday. Thank you for your generosity these past months. After she left, Adrian stood at the window, watching her cross the garden to the guest house, her shoulders shaking. With silent sobs, the victory he'd expected to feel was nowhere to be found, only a hollow ache, and Thomas's words echoing in his mind, "You're not looking." Perhaps his son was right. Perhaps he hadn't been seeing Sienna at all, only the shadows of his own fears projected onto her. Asterisk. The guest house felt empty without Sienna and Olivia. 2 weeks had passed since they'd moved to the small apartment across town. And despite Adrian's attempts to maintain normalcy, Thomas had grown withdrawn. Mrs. Fitzgerald was noticeably cooler toward him, and the house had reverted to its former sterility. Adrian stood in his garden, absent-mindedly pruning the rose bushes Jennifer had loved. The white blooms reminded him of her wedding bouquet, of promises made and kept until death separated them. But for the first time, another face kept appearing in his mind, Sienna's, fierce and wounded as she defended her right to grow beyond her past. Dad. Thomas appeared beside him, clutching a folded paper. Can we go see Sienna and Olivia? I made them a card. Adrian sighed, setting down his pruning shears. Thomas, I've explained that Sienna has her own life now. She has a new job. New home, but we're her friends, Thomas insisted. When my friend Jake moved schools, we still had playdates. Why can't we visit? The simple logic of his son's question cut through Adrian's carefully constructed justifications. What was he really protecting Thomas from? a woman who had shown him nothing but kindness and honesty about the parts of her life she'd chosen to share. "You miss her," Adrian said softly, a statement rather than a question. Thomas nodded, eyes downcast. She made the sad less big. The word struck Adrian with unexpected force. The sad Thomas's term for the grief that had enveloped their home since Jennifer's death had indeed receded during Sienna's time with them. That evening, after Thomas went to bed, Adrian found himself driving to the address Mrs. Fitzgerald had for Sienna's new apartment. The building was well maintained but modest, worlds away from his estate. He sat in his car for nearly an hour, questioning his purpose, before finally approaching her door. Sienna answered his knock with Olivia on her hip, surprise registering on her face. "Adrian should have called first," he said awkwardly. "May I come in?" Her apartment was small, but warmly decorated. Photos of Olivia and David shared space with a new one of Thomas holding Olivia, both laughing. Toys were neatly arranged in a corner, and textbooks sat open on the dining table. "I've enrolled in online classes," Sienna explained, following his gaze. "Business administration. The dental practice is helping with tuition." "That's wonderful," Adrian said sincerely. "Sienna, I came to apologize. My actions were inexcusable." She placed Olivia in her playpen before facing him. "Why are you really here, Adrian? 'Cause Thomas misses you?" he admitted, then added more quietly, "And so do I." Sienna crossed her arms protectively. "Missing someone isn't enough. Trust matters more." "I know," Adrian moved closer. "I've spent 2 years building walls to protect Thomas and myself from more pain. When you came into our lives, those walls started crumbling, and it terrified me. So you pushed me away first," Sienna concluded. Adrian nodded. "Jennifer was my compass. After losing her, I've been afraid to navigate without her guidance. Then you arrived with your own storm-tossed ship, somehow still sailing true despite everything." "I'm not perfect," Sienna reminded him. "Neither am I," Adrian acknowledged. "I judged your past without considering my own, the coldness I've shown others, the relationships I've sacrificed for success, the ways I've failed Thomas by trying too hard to protect him." Sienna's expression softened slightly. "What are you asking for, Adrian?" "A second chance," he said simply. "Not to go backward, you've built something good here. But perhaps bridge between your life and ours. For Thomas," she asked, hesitation in her voice. Adrian shook his head finally, allowing himself complete honesty. "For all of us, these past months showed me what our home could be, filled with laughter, forgiveness, growth, what I could be with someone brave enough to challenge me." He reached for her hand tentatively. "I'm not offering charity or convenience, Sienna. I'm offering partnership, whatever form that takes, however long it needs to develop." Tears filled Sienna's eyes. "I've been building a life independent of anyone else's approval. I can't give that up." "Would never ask you to," Adrian assured her. "Your strength is what I admire most. What Thomas needs to see, what I need to learn from." Sienna studied him for a long moment, searching for the walls that had separated them. Finding them lowered, she finally smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. "Thomas can visit this weekend," she offered. "We'll have a picnic in the park nearby." "And what about me?" Adrian asked softly. Sienna squeezed his hand. "You can help carry the picnic basket. The rest? We'll build that bridge one plank at a time." As spring blossomed into summer, that bridge grew stronger. Sienna completed her courses with Adrian, helping with late-night study sessions. Adrian attended Olivia's first birthday party at the small apartment, bringing Thomas and a cake Mrs. Fitzgerald had baked. Slowly, 2 broken families began weaving together into something new, not replacing what was lost, but honoring it while creating something equally precious. By Christmas, when Adrian proposed, it wasn't with grand gestures, but with simple words. Spoken in his garden, now blooming with roses of every color, Jennifer's whites joined by vibrant reds, sunny yellows, and delicate pinks that Sienna had helped plant. "We can't replace what either of us has lost," Adrian said, holding the ring that symbolized not ownership but partnership. "We can build something beautiful from the pieces." Sienna's answer came with the wisdom of someone who had weathered storms and found her strength within them. The most beautiful gardens grow where seeds have been scattered by the wind, finding unexpected places to take root and bloom. And as Thomas and Olivia cheered from the window where they'd been secretly, watching two paths, once separate, became one road forward for a family built, not by circumstance or convenience, but by choice.